right, it's so quiet right before you start up here. All right, so I'll just get right into it. I'm going to use my notes because it's kind of a difficult thing to get through without it sometimes. So, if you've never had to deal with severe depression, it might surprise you that a lot of the time, it's so much worse when everything is going well in your life, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but the times that you don't have to worry about the bills being paid or negative things going on in your life, everything's going great, it sneaks up on you. And that's part of the insidious thing about depression, is that it robs you of the ability to be really present and happy and to enjoy the successes and accomplishments in your life when it's niggling at you at the back of your mind. So in the winter of 2003, I was 22, living at home with my mother, and I should say, having moved back in with my mother after moving out at 17 and then incurring a large amount of debt. Surprisingly, that's not the tragic or sad part of the story. It actually went okay. I got along with my mother fine. I had just gotten a great job at Geico. I was making decent money. With no overhead, I very quickly paid off all of the debt I incurred. Everything was going pretty well. And after a while, I met a new friend through work, and I started to spend lots of time with him, and we're just going to call him Schmeichel. So Schmeichel and I hung out constantly, spent hours outside of work talking, going on, exploring Macon in the middle of the night because we both worked 4 to 12, and generally just having a good time. And if I'm honest, I did have kind of feelings for him, or else I thought I did at the time. And that, of course, distorted my view of our friendship, and maybe I overestimated how important that friendship had become to him. Because then, in a rather short amount of time, he convinced me to move to Macon. Since I was living with my mom, a half hour away from work, and everything going pretty well, I decided it'd be a great idea. I found a wonderful apartment on Orange Street. It was right across the street from a coffee shop, and I felt like I was living on Friends. Because, you know, in Bonnier, you can't walk across the street to get coffee, or walk next door to the library, or walk somewhere for dinner. So it was a completely different situation than what I'm used to, and it was pretty good. After a few months, Schmeichel must have decided that the season of our friendship had come to an end, because he just disappeared. So here I am, by myself, not knowing anyone, and to me, what was a new place? I've been to Macon, but if you're not from Macon, you don't really go to Macon a whole lot, especially if you're in the smaller areas, and unless you're going to the mall or the movie theater. So I still had my friends and family in Warner Robins, but being half an hour away, it still felt like they were so far. So isolated and alone, I started spending way too much time in my own head and having some thoughts crop up about things that I wasn't happy with in my life. And I just started going home, and I was going to work and coming home and not doing anything else. The highlight of my social life was going to dinner in Warner Robins with a good friend every Saturday, and her husband, and eventually their newborn. Which there's nothing wrong with that. I loved her dearly. But being 22 and that being the extent of my social life was not exactly a happy time. From there it got worse. My drinking became heavier, and I would spend a lot of my nights hanging out on the front porch of the building that I lived in with my coked out law school neighbors and just drinking and not doing much of anything productive. Then, wandering around the building, occasionally I would make some really bad and dangerous decisions drinking, and that turned into, if I found an empty apartment, I would just go explore it. So, you know, no one's there, it's empty, it was fun in my head. And then when I got to the second floor of the apartment, I see the windows going out to the roof. And I'm like, oh, well, that looks like fun. Another bad decision, go out on the roof. And then I look over at the part of the building that's separated by an alley 2 stories high. And I'm like, oh, that looks fun over there, let me go over there and look. But I couldn't get over there. And here I am in my robe and my slippers, drunk as a skunk, trying to figure out how I'm gonna get over there. And I noticed this very narrow, maybe about a foot, trench or whatever you want to call it, that goes across the alley. And you can picture me 280 pounds, I don't know, shitting across this narrow track of HVAC piping or whatever, not knowing what the hell I'm doing. And if I had fallen, I just would have died. I mean, it would have been it, or else severely hurt. So that was indicative of where my mind took me and what the decisions that I made. I'm not going to go into too many more of them, primarily because I'm not sure what the statute of limitations are. So we're just going to go on to the next part. One day, a longtime friend of mine asked me if he could stay with me for a while, because he was in between where he was living and then moving to his new boyfriend's house. And so I thought it was a great idea, and he moved in, we got along fine, and everything was pretty good. Shock and awe, I had feelings for him as well, as I did for a lot of friends that I got close to. So in my head, we had kind of set up house, and I was ignoring the fact that eventually that was going to come to an end. And when he finally did invariably move out, it was terrible, and I was pretty crushed. And that was pretty much my lowest point in my life. And if I'd had a slightly more developed faith or belief in the afterlife, that probably would have been it. And so, luckily, I'm terrified of death, so that is not something that happened, so here I am. And years later, when we were talking about that, I don't remember what the subject came up, but I mentioned to him, oh, it would be really great to be roommates. And then he looked at me like I was insane. He said, well, we lived together for 6 months. And I had to pause because I haven't always believed people when they said they blocked out things that have happened to them in their life. But I literally blocked out that entire time. And even today, I have to concentrate on focusing on details. When he made vegetarian biscuits and gravy that time, and I thought it was supposed to be healthy, and then there was a whole stick of butter, and I was very confused. But these details are the only things I can really remember, and even then it seems like it happened to someone else. Like I'm just flashing back on snippets from someone else's life because it was just so awful that I just blocked it. So shortly after this, I met someone on a dating website who seemed just as sad and lonely as I was. So clearly that didn't work out at a romantic level. But I did end up going to his birthday party that was hosted by someone I didn't know. And when I contacted him for directions, he said, well, my apartment is apartment I as in interesting. And I don't know why that really grabbed me. And I'm like, I'm going to enjoy meeting this person. Then when the party happened, I did meet him. His name was Jason, and he was the most insanely energetic, random, funny, smart, and pretty damn attractive person that I thought I'd ever met. He paid attention to me, laughed at my jokes, then subsequently began inviting me over frequently to meet his other friends, and we just generally had a great time, went on adventures, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like someone was not just interested in being around me because I was pliable or agreeable or that I could do something for them, but because they genuinely, enjoyed being around me. And even when I was at my most awkward or weird or crazy, and if you have known me for a long time, most people don't remember me from before I met Jason, I used to be super awkward and weird, but without the humor or the timing, so I was just odd. It was very difficult to relate to me at that point because I hadn't quite learned how to hone that humor part of it, so it was just weird. So naturally, I thought I was in love with him because I didn't realize until much later that I used to equate romantic love to just any affection that I got from another man because I'd not experienced it. And so I just thought that, oh, this person's paying attention to me. I must be in love with them. They must be in love with me. We're supposed to be together. So the part of our friendship that really cemented the lifetime connection that we have is when he let me invite myself on his trip to Ireland. He just said he was going. I said, that sounds like fun. I'll go too. And eventually he let me go. which was an entirely different story that we don't have time for, and I'm almost out of time anyway. So the other point in our friendship that cemented it was the Queen of Hearts ball. Now, his boyfriend never got to go to prom, so Jason decided that he was going to throw a gay prom for him. And not just, like a party at his house. I'm talking an event venue, thousands of dollars. I mean, Jason never does anything small. So we planned over 6 months, and together we made it a charity event for the Central City AIDS Network and ended up raising, I don't remember how many people, but it was the Armory Ballroom. It was wonderful. We raised $10,000, and after 4 years of living downtown, I got to know what's so special about Macon, and specifically downtown. It's, excuse me, all the oddballs and misfits and crazy people that just make it what it is. And that's why I love living here, and these people have become my loudest supporters, my best allies, and the village that has come to accept me for who I am, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Even today, he never really realized what he did for me when he met me, because as usual when people are depressed or having issues, it's not present. I mean, the whole sad clown thing is a thing for a reason. You're on the outside, you're fine, but on the inside, you're going insane. But he helped me not only discover my own value, but how to become the person that I finally ended up being, happy on my own, confident, and it really led to every positive professional and personal thing that's happened to me since then, including marrying my most amazing husband right over there. So the end of it is, my finish line was meeting that group of people and discovering my own value. And even something as insidious as depression, it doesn't have to be the only thing that defines you. And that's what I've learned. If you ever feel like you have no value or that no one understands you, you can't give up, because your own group of, or village, or whatever you want to call it, of oddballs, misfits, and weirdos is out there waiting to prove you wrong. You just have to let yourself be open to it and willing to find them.